Welcome, my name is Irit. I'm a watercolor and mixed media artist based in Austria in Europe, and on my channel I share my passion for watercolor and mixed media. Today I'm going to unbox this beautiful set of gouache paints. I'm going to talk a little bit about what gouache is, and I'm going to start using them. So if you'd like to hear more details, please continue watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down so that I know what you like. And of course, I would love for you to subscribe. Let's get into this beautiful set. All the supplies will be listed below. These are gouache by Holbein. And if you're not familiar with gouache, they are very similar to watercolor in their formulation, meaning that they come in these little tubes. They're not permanent, they are water soluble, and they are reworkable. The difference between these and watercolors is, well, some are actually pretty similar. Mainly, I would say the difference is the way that people use them. So most gouache artists use their paint straight out of the tube because it can get very crumbly when it's dry. Not all gouache, but most that I've tried, and I've tried several brands, they can't like stay nice in your palette for years. They will just crumble and like fall off. But mostly people use them straight from the tube with not a lot of water, so kind of to create more of an opaque finish. And you can water these down, and just like watercolors, some are more transparent and some are more opaque. It depends on the pigment and on the formulation, like how much white, for example, is added to a particular paint. Like I can already see this one looks pretty pastel-y. So that to me is kind of the main difference, just the way that people paint with them. I feel it's a different experience than painting with watercolor. I feel there's like a learning curve. I haven't painted a ton with gouache, and when I have, I mostly used it kind of as watercolors. This is a very popular medium for illustrators, for example, people that illustrate books, because you can rework these and they come in a really nice color range. And you can do a lot with them. You can layer them on top of each other. Obviously, you want to wait for the bottom layers to dry. A lot of watercolor artists also use gouache, mostly as a final layer when they're done with the watercolors, because of the opaque qualities of these paints. I have a few actually also from Holbein, and they're really, really nice, but I liked this curated set. There are two more, and I'll try to put pictures on the screen. They all look fantastic. The packaging is beautiful, but the colors themselves, kind of these, spoke to me the most. So what I'm going to do, as I said, I feel these are much better used freshly squeezed. I have here a little palette that I bought in Japan. And, you know, since this is Holbein and it's Japanese and I have this empty row, I thought I could just squeeze a few so I can swatch the colors for you. And I will link to this below if you're interested. I got mine from Jackson's in the UK. And you do get a lot of paint, so it comes with 12 colors and each tube has 15 mils. It's a lot of paint. I'll just squeeze these in and then we can swatch them. What I also want to say about these is that they are different from acrylic gouache, if you've heard of those. Acrylic gouache is an acrylic paint, meaning everything that comes with that. It is water soluble and you can use it just as you would acrylic paints, but it is permanent once dry. It's a very popular paint for good reason, because Holbein, for example, their acrylic gouache come in an incredible range of colors. And yeah, once it's dry, it's permanent. So it's just like an acrylic paint, but it has that kind of traditional matte, sometimes chalky finish of gouache paint. So don't confuse the two. I think probably acrylic gouache are a little bit easier to use, especially if you're used to acrylic paints. And another thing I want to say about these palettes, I talk a lot about color on my channel and about curating palettes. And I really like it when brands create their own kind of curated color stories. So you can find, I don't know if they have for every season, but for sure there's an autumn and winter sets. There's probably also a summer set. But what is great about these is that kind of someone already did the heavy lifting for you. So if you want to try, let's say, a more seasonal color palette, or you don't even have to look at it like that, just a certain mood, you don't have to figure it out yourself, but you can just pick up a set and paint with it, and you'll already start with this curated color story. I'll start by sharing my opinion about this particular set and the color selection, and then I'll talk a little bit about my experience painting with it. So the color selection of this set and the other set, it's supposed to be a curated palette. It is a limited palette, some more than others. This is probably a little bit more colorful than the other palettes, which are more limited. So this is not a starter set. This is not a basic set. However, if you have a basic set of gouache and you want to try this curated palette, if one of the palettes speaks to you, it is a high quality product and the quality is lovely. They're very kind of smooth and creamy and intense and opaque, and they are fun to paint with. I do want to say that I have a couple of older Holbein brushes. They're not like 20, not brushes, tubes, gouache tubes. They're not like 20 years old. They're, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old. And a couple of them are kind of rock hard, and I'm not sure I can revive them. So keep in mind that this is a product, unless these two are duds, it does have a shelf life that I feel is slightly shorter than watercolors. Probably not for all colors, because I have other tubes that are fine. But yeah, you might want to just keep that in mind and use your paints. So I do think if you're familiar with gouache, I think you will enjoy these sets, or one of them if you like the colors. But if you're new to the medium, you might want to consider a more basic set. Now, as for my experience, I have to say I'm kind of putting back my watercolor artist hat on, because I did start using these kind of the same way that I use my watercolors, just because that's my happy place, that's my safe place. And it's not a fair way of judging these, because I'm always kind of comparing them to my watercolors. So as you can see, you can absolutely use them like that. And if you have a lovely set of gouache and maybe you don't want to paint with watercolors or like buy watercolors, you can play around with these and get similar effects. I do miss the whole granulating, separating aspect that I love so much about watercolors. But again, this is a different medium. One of the biggest advantages of gouache for me personally, especially if I want to use it more like acrylic paint, is that I can still use my beloved watercolor brushes and they won't get ruined. You never want to use your watercolor brushes with acrylic paint, but with gouache, because it's not a permanent paint, you can. And so you see me playing with my beautiful magic wand. This is a Tracy Lebenzon brush that I absolutely adore. And it was just as fun to paint with gouache. But as I said, this is not a fair way of judging these. I can only judge their pigmentation and intensity and how easily they blend and mix, and they do that effortlessly. As for the color selection, specifically for me, I'm very particular with color. There are a few colors that probably will not be very useful to me. The purple in the set is not my cup of tea. There's a lemon yellow that is very, very intense. I'm kind of liking it, but I don't know if I like it in paintings. I kind of feel like I want to knit with it, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And then the silver was a bit too transparent. For me, it was like a little bit disappointing. I really wanted it to kind of be more foiled. And then there's that minty color, which looks amazing on screen, but it's not as nice in real life, or at least it's not exactly that color that you see on screen. Like on screen, that minty color is perfection, but in reality, it's just a little bit less vibrant minty and just a little bit more greenish. So just want to make that clear. Sometimes the screen can be deceiving. It just captures colors in a different way. Obviously, if I could curate my own selection, it would be slightly different. But sometimes it's nice when someone else does the heavy lifting for you. So here you can see I brought in my flat brush and also added a few of the other colors. I didn't see the need to just limit myself to this palette because I just wanted to have fun and explore. And I feel like a flat brush is the way to go with gouache if you want a more opaque application, because it just holds less water than round brushes. Usually with watercolors, I like to have a nice amount of water. But here it's just, it just depends. So I think the next time I'll attempt to paint with this, I'll just start with the flat brush and kind of try more that painterly, thicker application of paint than I would with watercolors. So that's just my personal experience as someone who loves painting with watercolors, but still wanted to try these, but still wanted to paint with watercolors. So I hope you can take all that under consideration when you listen to my experience. But it is a really nice quality set, and it compares to other artist grade gouache paints that I've tried. I think my favorite is Winsor & Newton. They have a gorgeous selection of pinks, and I just always like the opportunity of playing around with mediums. I think maybe for me what I can use gouache for is actually sketching paintings before I use acrylics, because it just gives me a bit more flexibility, and again I can use my favorite brushes that I feel comfortable with. So maybe sketch in a sketchbook with gouache, and then if I like what I see and what I do, if I like the colors and composition, translate that into an a painting with acrylic paint on canvas or another surface. So yeah, here I'm just having fun trying to mix the colors. They mix beautifully. I would recommend, if you're buying one of these sets, to also treat yourself. I don't know if there's white in any of them, but I highly, highly recommend just getting a large tube. I don't know, brush bag, all the words came to my mind. A large tube of white gouache. At some point I brought my mine, which is from Schminke, and this really allows you to mix lighter tones. I do think sometimes with gouache, when you water them down, they kind of, I don't know, they don't have that lovely, brilliant effect of watercolors, but they just tend to be a little bit more flat. Not all colors, but some. And so I like, if I want to lighten them, I prefer to add white instead of watering them down. And yeah, of course, you can work in layers. You just want to wait for the layer beneath to dry. So I hope you enjoyed this unboxing and swatching and playing around, and I will see you soon in another video. Take care and bye bye. Have a lovely weekend. Bye.